So let's see if we are actually live already. Let's see. Yes, we are live. Let's wait a couple of seconds until more people are joining. Also, please let us know if the sound is up and working or if we have any issues that we might not recognize here in the studio. So yeah, please feel free. Also, please feel free to retreat because today is a very, very interesting topic. We will focus on MEV, a topic that is very well discussed at the moment. And so excited to have you once again on the show, Sunny.
Thanks for having me on. I think this might actually be my first time on the show, actually.
Yeah, if you're like very strict with it, yes. But the YouTube channel, we just rebranded the YouTube channel, so it's the first one was with CryptoCito just after Osmosis launched, and back then we talked about these crazy APRs that you got on different pools. But yeah, today we are talking, and now Osmosis is a year old, so super excited about this. Again, happy to have you on. And before we dive really deep into the discussion, because MEV is a topic that wouldn't necessarily be the most easiest to understand topic in crypto, especially if you are new to crypto. So I would just make a very brief introduction from a very high level. So MEV is nothing else than making the most out of a block space. So you know that we have block producers on different chains. We have block producers on Osmosis. We have block producers on Bitcoin. And MEV just describes the maximum value that one can extract from a block. That's basically it. But there are so many discussions around MEV for very good reasons. And Sunny, you also held a keynote at Nebula Summit in Paris about it. So before we really dive deeper into the topic, when MEV became very popular for the very first time was when the Medium blog post emerged. Ethereum is a dark forest, and MEV was heavily criticized, or some people even view it as a threat. So could you maybe elaborate what is wrong about having, block space and trying to make the most out of it?
Yeah, so I would say, the way I actually frame MEV, how I would define it is it's the value that can be extracted by the block proposer with the things that they have single-handed control over. So, there's certain things that a block proposer doesn't have single-handed control over, right? They can't put fake transactions. They can't do, print coins and stuff, right? Because the consensus system is what validates that. But there are some things that the block proposer actually does have single-handed control over. So that includes things like, what transactions to include in a block and what order to put transactions. There's also other things that they can do in many blockchains, they control the timestamp and all this kind of stuff. So there are other sorts of MEV that I would say that are I call that non-transaction based MEV. But when we're talking about transaction, I think the biggest piece that we're interested in is this controlling transaction inclusion and transaction ordering, and as long as the transaction is the block is valid, no other validators don't reject the block. They're like, okay, yeah, this is a valid. So the proposer has full control over that. And so the MEV is the value they can extract by that. And so I actually have been putting things into, I put the big category, I call it good MEV versus bad MEV. But what do I mean by that? Bad MEV, what I mean is the type of MEV that relies on reading other people's transactions. So in blockchains today, we have this public mempool. When you make a transaction, it kind of goes out in the open for everyone to see, and then it's put into a block. And then this leads to all sorts of things like, front running and sandwich attacks, back running, dark forest attacks, or call that generalized front running. So what are these attacks? Like, a sandwich attack would be like, hey, I read your transaction and I can see that, okay, look, I see that you're about to make a certain trade. I can put my a trade in front of yours and a trade behind yours in order to profit off of that. I buy right before you buy, and then I'll sell right after you, and I can like get a little bit of profit off of that. And that works is because I can, like, if I as a block producer can like control the exact ordering of the block, I can like place these transactions strategically in a block to make sure that I get that guaranteed profit. You also have these like issues around what we call like generalized front running or dark forest attacks, where it's not even like imagine there's like, you found this really cool opportunity on chain, right? That like, you realize there's an arbitrage that no one else has found, or, I like to imagine this, like, imagine there's just like a bunch of on-chain puzzles and you solve the solution to a puzzle. Well, you go ahead and submit that solution, but anyone else can just see that and like copy your answer. And then if they control the ordering, they can make sure that their transaction comes first, so that to the blockchain, it looks like they submitted the solution before you did. And so that's another sort of like bad MEV. And once again, I think the key thing that like unifies both of these things is it's all dependent on reading other people's transactions before they hit the blockchain. And to us, this is like almost fundamentally like a privacy breach, where it's like, you're the fact that you're able to read other people's intentions before they actually get executed is not fair. And that's not how like any actual, even on centralized it's funny that centralized exchanges have better privacy than blockchains. And so our goal is like, yeah, we have to solve that bad MEV by it's fundamentally a privacy problem. And so we have to fix this with privacy solutions and building mempool privacy especially. And then there's like the whole other category of good MEV that like we can get into as well. But yeah, that's what I mean by bad MEV. And
yeah, 100%. And again, I remember your keynote in Paris, and I totally agree with you here. I mean, there are so many ways to abuse the system, to front run someone, for example. So there are, definitely some problems with it. Still, what I do not understand as of now, where I try to wrap my head around a little bit, is this to say there is good and bad MEV. So this meme is a little bit complicated for me, because like, again, we started this conversation with what is MEV essentially, and for me it's like just block space. So where am I wrong? So why are we entitled to divide between good and bad MEV?
So good MEV, what I mean by that is it's the type that's not dependent on reading other people's transactions. So imagine, I mentioned the example of a puzzle, right? Imagine there was like a hard puzzle and, saying that like, whoever solves it, I can steal your solution. That's bad MEV. But what if the puzzle was like, what is 2 + 2? And the first person to submit an answer gets it. It's like, I don't need to copy anyone else's answer. It's like, everyone already knows the answer, and it's just a matter of who submits it. And it's like, someone is going to be first. And it seems kind of like arbitrary on who is first, right? It's not a matter of like copying someone else's answer. And so, okay, calling that good is maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but let's call that neutral MEV. It's not, there's no aggrieved party here, right? There's no one being harmed by like, the block producer saying, hey, I'm going to put my answer of 4 before anyone else's, right? Like no one else got rugged, or no one, like they would with the sandwich attack, or no one got like their answer stolen from them. So at the very least, let's call it neutral MEV. And then when I would say there's examples of where it becomes a good is like, what do I mean by puzzle, right? It's not really puzzles on chain. There's things like, liquidations, right? So you have protocols like Maker and Compound and Mars. What they want is like these liquidation systems where, the protocol needs to be able to liquidate quickly, because like if positions are underwater, the protocol wants to liquidate quickly so that it can, remove bad debt from the system and keep the lending protocol, solvent. And so what protocols like Maker do is they will like pay people to do liquidator. So they'll basically put up a bounty that says, hey, anyone who submits lets the protocol know that there's a liquidation, we will, we'll liquidate them and we'll give that person a reward for submitting that it's a liquidation. Now the thing is, like, finding liquidations is like trivial. It's not like a hard problem. It's not a hard puzzle. It's like, you have to write a bot for it, but it's like these bots are like open source. I think like Maker puts out their own open source bots that everyone can use as well. So it's like, it's not a hard problem. It's just that someone has to do that, has to do it. So, let's give a slight reward to make sure that there's people doing it. So that's what I would say. That's an example where it's good MEV, where it is actually helping the protocol. It's helping maintain the solvency of the protocol. And it is giving a reward to the person that solves the problem.
Yeah, that's the key takeaway here also, I would say, because now we talk about that people are doing things where the protocol profits from. So it's like very important that there are no uncollateralized loans on Maker, for example. And now the idea basically came up because this was also described in this blog post, Ethereum as a dark forest, that MEV is very inaccessible for the average user, or in fact it is inaccessible. And the idea now is that on Cosmos, for example, that validators basically share the MEV they get with the fellow user in form of an increased APR. And now let's dive a little bit into tokenomics as well, because we see, for example, Osmosis won't be that inflationary in 10 years from now. And also, of course, the staking APR is strongly dependent on inflation. So when the inflation of most of the Cosmos tokens are very, very, very low, is MEV actually one of the only survival plans for the validator to still be profitable by searching for MEV, for example, and then give it away to the fellow user?
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. So like, what at the end of the day, what you need is your protocol should have like some source of revenue, right? Like, where is the value accruing from? And there's a couple of sources in most L1 blockchains, or in most chains. There's like a few sources. Primarily, there's transaction fees, and there's MEV. I think in Osmosis, which is nice as an app chain, there's a third one, which is swap fee revenue. So, you can imagine that in the future, like there'll probably be like some percentage of all trades. That's a fee that goes to Osmo stakers as well. So we have that, extra source of revenue there as well. But so I think that will actually be a big significant portion. If you look at like, centralized exchanges today, that's actually the biggest source of their revenue. But let's put that aside for now. I think the MEV will probably be like the second biggest source of revenue, because you have a lot of chains today that are dependent on transaction fees as their like source of revenue. But in our opinion, like, in a world where the transaction fees are actually significant and like high value, it's like that means your transaction fees are too high, and it's like actually too hard for your people to actually use your protocol, and that's like not what we want, right? So, I think that having the MEV be where the source of revenue is coming from, it makes sort of a lot more sense. Anatoly had a tweet a couple of weeks ago where he mentioned that like, hey, the only value of these L1 tokens is their MEV that they can capture, because he kind of agrees with this notion that like, hey, if transaction fees are too high and that's your source of revenue, that means your blockchain is too hard to use, too expensive to use. So so it's like, okay, that MEV. So one cool thing about app chains is like, as an app developer, if you're building on a generalized blockchain, you're giving away all that MEV value to the L1 token. But instead, as an app chain, you can say like, no, we're going to capture that MEV value and figure out a way of making sure it gets distributed to Osmo stakers and Osmo holders.
Yeah, it's funny because I really wanted to talk about this tweet as well. I saw you commented below the tweet, I think it was like a week ago or so. But yeah, I think this is like a very important point here to mention, because MEV was very well discussed in the Ethereum community, but in Cosmos, it's kind of a new topic, I would say. So people just picked up this conversation very recently. So my question now here is it actually beneficial for Cosmos, like from a protocol design? You mentioned it with app chains. Can the Cosmos ecosystem, can Cosmos make much more out of MEV than Ethereum, for example, does? Because if I'm using Aave and there's MEV generated by Aave, there is no Aave chain, so there are no Aave stakers. So everything is just captured by Ethereum. So is this basically the direction where this discussion is heading?
I think so. I think that's going to be I think that's one of the many reasons that DYDX also decided to go down that route as well. I think that's a valuable part of their token. But yeah, I think that like more and more apps are going to realize that like, hey, this is value that should be protocol value. So yeah.
So in a nutshell, like that, this could also be a reason why more and more projects like, for example, SushiSwap or Compound could say, hey, we want to launch our own chain, also mainly because of MEV.
Yeah, and like you can have that stuff be triggered automatically, right? Where it's like, and one thing cool that we have with Cosmos SDK is we have this idea of self-executing code. And what, we can, at the beginning of every block, we can actually, in the protocol say, hey, let's look for liquidations and like, trigger the liquidation. So we don't have to pay some outside searcher for that. We can collect the 100% of the liquidation revenue and as part of the protocol. So, you can do this for liquidations. You can do this for very like basic arbitrage. So I think arbitrage, like, between pools and stuff is a little bit harder than it seems, just because like there is, it is a hard computational problem. So you're not going to find the perfect solution on chain. I think the off chain people who have like these giant GPUs that are like, grinding for it are going to find the better solutions. But, you can get like on chain simple solutions that are like, still capture maybe 50%, 75% of the value. And so I think that's where the benefit is going to be, or where the value, how you capture that in an app chain using that self-executing code. And then there's also, anything else you can capture through like on-chain auctions, which we can talk about as well.
Yeah, 100%. We will also talk about Skip Protocol and Mechatech 100%. But one last question, because I think this comparison with Ethereum is very interesting. Again, the protocols are on top of Ethereum, and Cosmos, they are their own chains. But what's about the practice? So what would it look like in practice? Because I know, for example, on Aave, you could do a flash loan where you have an under-collateralized loan and realize an arbitrage opportunity that, let's say, can get realized on Uniswap and Balancer, but can we achieve the same level of capital efficiency in Cosmos through IBC, so that I, for example, could get an under-collateralized on Ume and realizing an arbitrage opportunity on Osmosis? Would this in practice be possible in the same way?
Yeah, so I think actually the Mars team probably has like the best design for how to build an on-chain lending protocol. So what they're doing is like, they have their Mars hub, but that will have outposts on other chains. And so that gives you access to synchronous liquidity co-located with every DEX. So you can have like synchronous liquidity on Osmosis, on Sift chain, on Crescent, whatever DEX, right? And you can make sure that like, you can still have that, do those fully atomic like arbitrage loops and stuff between the lending protocol and DEXs. So I think that's sort of the right design for how these, how IBC stuff is going to work is we'll have some like, it's going to take some design changes from how things work in Ethereum, but I think we will get to how, doing it correctly.
I see. And now let's get back to the point that you just mentioned regarding like Mekatech or Skip protocol that want to basically facilitate the access to MEV, so to say. So could you give us like a broad introduction to this as well? So how could we imagine this in practice? Like one day when, for example, Skip protocol is deployed on some chains, how would this work?
Yeah. So Skip protocol, they're still like sort of working out how their product is going to look. There's a couple of options, but you can imagine the V1 is just having single chain auctions. These are the things that I actually think will end up getting internalized into protocols eventually. So, Skip chain is saying like, hey, we can run this like off-chain auction system. And I think that's the right way to do it until we have like threshold encryption. But once we have threshold encryption, you can actually run this auction in the protocol. So everyone can submit transactions to the blockchain and say, hey, I want to bid to be the first one in the block. And then they'll go ahead and they submit, it's just called a sealed bid auction. So what we can say is like, hey, transactions can make a special bid to say, hey, I want to try to be the first one in the block. And if I don't get to be the first one in a block, I just don't want to like execute at all. Don't decrypt me. Don't execute me. And so that's like a way you can build something like Skip into the protocol. And that's like really, so I think that ends up getting internalized. Where stuff like Skip does, take effect is when you get into like cross-chain MEV. So, what happens when there's like an arbitrage opportunity between Osmosis and Crescent, for example, right? So there's like, it'll be cool if like, with Skip, you can submit an atomic bundle that says, hey, we want to do one transaction on, we want to do a buy on Osmosis and a sell on JunoSwap or Crescent at the same time, right? And that way, make sure you get this like atomic arbitrage. I think that is something that like Skip can enable. Now, the big question that we need to figure out is, do we want this enabled, or like, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And it's like, I think this is sort of a discussion that has just been ongoing. We're in very close communication and collaboration with the Skip team, and I think their team is really good at like wanting, they're very like ecosystem forward and want to like make sure that we're like promoting only like good MEV in the ecosystem and stuff. But yeah, so there's still a lot of questions to decide. Like, hey, do we want a world where we have like atomic arbitrages between chains? Yes or no?
I see. And what I find very interesting, actually, also about this discussion is like, I mean, there is Skip and there's also Mekatech. They have like kind of a different approach, so to say. But in one way, they're like very similar. So as far as I understood it, right, is that they basically start to separate the block proposer and the block builder. This is how this discussion basically started at the beginning of the video. So in your view, like, is it really net positive that we separate these two parties now from each other? Because as of now, the validator is the block proposer and the block builder. So just like focusing on this aspect, would you say that this makes sense?
Yes, it does. But I guess what I'm suggesting is who becomes the block proposer is, I think, the protocol itself. So we kind of reverse the order, where what validators do is they create the block and put the transactions in the block, but they don't know what the transactions are, right? Because all the transactions are encrypted. And then what happens is the blockchain protocol, it then, decrypts the transactions and decides what order to put them in. And it can be smarter about the order, rather than just saying like, oh, we have to execute transactions in the order that they were put into the block. It's like, no. We could be like, hey, okay, we want all the arbitrage, we want all the Oracle updates to go at the beginning of the block. We want we want all the ad liquidities. No, we want all the trading, the trades to go first, and then we do all the removing of liquidity. And we can be smarter about how we do that. So it is actually yes, it is an idea to separate the block builder from the block proposer, but it's who's the block proposer it's the protocol itself, that we move transaction ordering to being an in protocol decision, which is something that hasn't really been done before.
Yeah, that's exactly the point here. It hasn't really been done before, and Skip and Mekatech have one thing in common. Both are very young, and there is not much documentation about it. So, with all of that in mind, and also with the fact in mind that the total extractable value on Ethereum was, I think, is $680 million as of now. So, basic question: how big do you think will the MEV market become over the next couple of years?
It'll grow with the size of the ecosystem, basically, right? So, Osmosis volumes are sort of at an all-time low right now, just based off of the status state of the market. But we see that well, maybe not all-time low, not as bad as last month, but especially when we have periods a few months ago when we had regular $100 million volume days. I think the Skip team has actually been doing some good research, and the Flashbot team as well has been doing research on okay, how much MEV is there being extracted on a per day basis. I think they saw that last month, which keep in mind one of the lowest MEV months or volume months, there was about 100K of MEV revenue that was to be captured, but that scales with the amount of trading activity on the chain.
I see. And as of now, do you have any numbers to share? So this was actually a community question here. How much value has been extracted from blocks on Osmosis so far?
No, I don't have a really good number for this. We can, put up. Like I said, the Skip team has been doing some research on this. I can ask them to share some of the data that they've been doing. We could also put up a flip side bounty for it as well, so maybe we can get some data from that.
Yes, and another thing, and I think now we should. You mentioned the volume on Osmosis. I would like to dive deeper into the discussion what Osmosis is also working on right now. So I want to focus right now on MEV solely on Osmosis. There are so many exciting things that are going on. For example, the move from AMM to Orderbook. Then you mentioned Mars will also launch on Osmosis. So first of all, maybe we can talk a little bit about the switch from AMM to Orderbook. So what is this development all about, and how will this impact MEV on Osmosis?
Mm-hmm. So the move from AMMs to AMMs, these passive AMMs, are really good at bootstrapping ecosystems, right? It's so much easier to start a new market rather than have to go find active market makers and have them fill up your order book. At AMM, you can just have your community just put liquidity in the protocol and it will automatically market make for you. And that worked really well for bootstrapping the ecosystem. But I think the Cosmos ecosystem has grown so much in the last 1 year now, and it's and especially as we're bringing in more mature assets, the passive AMMs are just not very competitive with the more order book style AMM or more order book style systems. So, if you look at the dot pool on Osmosis, right? To get that to be really usable, we need to have more concentrated use of that liquidity. And so that's why we want to go towards order books. Now, when I say order book, I don't actually mean this type of order book people might be mostly familiar with. I mean more in the family of Uniswap v3 and concentrated liquidity system. So it is what's really nice about the Uniswap v3 design is it's kind of a blend between an AMM and an order book. It lets people, be on an order book, act passive liquidity provider if they want to, and then it allows people to also place like more concentrated liquidity as well and have it act like limit orders. So you kind of get a little bit of the best of both worlds there. But how this will affect MEV is it'll just bring in more volume, right? So right now, larger volume will come where there's more liquidity, and if you can have a better concentrated liquidity, then more volume will come in to like trade on that exchange, and then as the volume goes up, the MEV also will naturally go up as well. You also get like these situations in Uniswap v3 right now. There's a lot of MEV around these like what do you call it, liquidity sandwiching and stuff, but that stuff kind of gets solved via threshold encryption.
And is this like back to the point with the higher the volume, also the higher the MEV? Is this also the same thing, or is this also the case after Mass Protocol launched on Osmosis? Is the impact very similar, so to say?
So having something like Mars launch would open up they'll have like liquidations and stuff, so that will be like one source of like people might want to pay to be the one to trigger the liquidation, and then with Mars we also will be able to get like leverage trading and stuff, and so that will once again just bring in more volume.
I see. And I think this is like actually the most interesting development on Osmosis right now. And also like with Mars, that you mentioned that they have their hub, their own chain, and then they go everywhere where liquidity is, so to say. Yep. But regarding, you mentioned the encryption part. So some people were also very curious. So I remember your interview at CosmWasm 2021 with the blog, where you explained how you want to prevent the bad effects of MEV by encrypting the transactions in the mempool. And back then, I think you worked with Sika on that. But now I think now you also wanted to work with Ferveo on it. So could you maybe talk a little bit about the decryption in the mempool and also in the threshold?
Yeah. So threshold decryption, how it works is you can imagine, so people might be familiar more with like threshold signatures, where it's kind of like a multi-sig but in cryptography. So it allows we can have a group of 5 of us and say, okay, we're going to create a threshold signature that like as long as 3 of us produce the shares of the signature, it produces one threshold signature. Threshold encryption, or someone actually pointed out to me yesterday that I keep saying threshold encryption. What it really it's threshold decryption. We're not encrypting something together, we're decrypting something together. So, threshold decryption is, everyone, there's a threshold needed in order to decrypt a piece of data. And so, we can have something like, so what would happen on how this applies to the chain is when you make a transaction, you encrypt it to the validators all share like one public key that you encrypt to, and then you encrypt your transaction to that key, and then the block composer takes all the encrypted transactions, puts them in a block. But then what they do is when they vote on a block, they also include their decryption share, and once you have 2/3 of votes on a block, that also means you have 2/3 decryption shares, and that means you can anyone can decrypt and execute all the transactions at that point. And so we Sika, which is kind of like my validator company I had, and we were working on this before starting Osmosis. We kind of came up with a lot of the design for this, and then the Anoma team was like sort of thinking along very similar ideas at that time, and so we kind of combined efforts on this, and so they've actually been helping lead on a lot of some of the implementation work around it. And so they've been calling the product, it's called Ferveo, and so we're going to be able to integrate that into Osmosis as well, and provide the same threshold encryption work. And so the paper around this actually, Dave and some of the Anoma folks, their paper actually just came out, I think like last week or something, that kind of explains the whole protocol.
And do you have any timeline for this already?
Not yet. Right now, I think our plan is to focus on shipping order books first. I think that is just like top of mind, high priority. And then I think the threshold decryption will be the sort of next thing we'll do after that.
I see. So actually, if we dive deeper into the current developments at Osmosis, everything is very MEV specific. So everything basically has to do with MEV. I think this is also why it became such a hot topic, so to say. Another question that I picked up from the community is if Viveo, so if it will be shipped, how will you gonna address the problem with displacement of arbitrage opportunities to the next block and the resulting incentive to spam?
Yeah, so what will happen is, well, one, the arbitrage, so that's why you build the on-chain transaction on-chain auction system and like the on-chain arbitrager, so that way instead of someone else being able to spam to in the next block in order to get the arbitrage opportunity, that gets captured by the protocol itself. Now, how do you prevent spamming in the same block? That's where batching comes in. So you also need to basically have a batch execution system for your trade. So instead of trades happening one at a time, you want to actually make it so all the trades in one block get the same pricing. So that's sort of one of the also big changes that would need to happen as well.
Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And what I think we were like very, very, very deep in the discussion right now, also with the aspect of decryption. But now I want to go a little bit out again. Want to zoom out a little bit and want to view the things from a broader perspective. So I mentioned in the beginning that some people are a little bit afraid of MEV. So one question was also whether we should not completely prevent MEV. So this was a community question that appeared quite often after we made a tweet and asked what the community questions asked. So what would be your response on that to prevent MEV as much as possible?
So
I believe the discussion is about this bad MEV aspect. So I think this was.
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? My bad.
Yeah. So no, the question was like that these people are like that the term MEV is like very bad branded at the moment, and people want to basically try to ban MEV in total.
Yeah.
So if it's not possible to basically prevent the emergence of MEV generally, so what is your take on that?
Yeah, like I mean, maybe yeah. So it is like the term is like, I kind of actually fell to that for a long time as well. I was like, oh, all MEV is bad. And then I realized like, okay, there are these like neutral MEVs, right? And so how, maybe we need to come up with a new terminology for this, right? Where this is like, let's call it like protocol, not extractable value. Let's call it like protocol earned value or something like that, right? Like where this is value that, and that's the key, right? We don't want this to go to miners or proposers only. We want this to be moved into the protocol. And so in a way, we are, even with like internalization, we are trying to remove the revenue away from the block proposers and towards the all stakers. And so yeah, that is I think how I've been pitching is like maximizing protocol revenue.
Yeah, and
I think it's a branding thing that needs to be solved here.
That's exactly the thing. It's like MEV is just connected to these dark forest meme, and but you mentioned something very very interesting, like this maximization of leveraging as much as possible from this from the block space. So for me, it would be also interesting, like should blockspace, so we what we see at Mechatech nowadays, should blockspace basically be auctioned for the sake of maximizing profit? Is this like generally a good idea, or is there also some risk behind it?
So the thing is, it's okay. So there are a couple of things. One, it's going to be auctioned no matter what, right? So if it's not done in protocol, it's going to be done by off-chain systems like Skip and Flashbots and stuff, right? So it's going to be auctioned no matter what. And also, like I said, it's a good thing that you want it to actually be done in an auction, because that frees up the rest of the block for not being filled with spam. So if it wasn't done by an auction, people. So what used to happen in Ethereum before Flashbots came around was there was like the gas prices were so much higher because all of the transaction, all this block space was being used for this bidding on the auction. So if you think about it, in a blockchain, there's actually we're kind of splitting it. There's two auctions going on at the same time. There's some people just want to be in the block, right? And that's what your like transaction min fee and all that is, the min gas fee is, right? You just want to be in the block. You're trying to make a trade, do whatever. But then there's like the special spot, which is like the first spot in the block, and some people want to be in that one, right? And so you have a separate auction for that. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone to like the amusement park, right? And have you ever gone, like, there's on the roller coaster, there's a special line that if you want to, like, if you get to the front of the line, they're like, oh, you can just go on the roller coaster, or you can get in a special line, because if you're one of those like people who want to sit in the front seat of the roller coaster. I know I always like to sit in the front seat of the roller coaster, so I'll go wait in the extra long line just to go sit in that front seat, right? But that's nice, because it's like, okay, you can separate this out for different people. Like, some people, they just want to be on the roller coaster. They don't care to be in that first spot. While people who do want to be in that first spot, they have to wait in this longer line. It's the same situation here. It's like, okay, let's have a special auction just for the people that want that first spot in a block, because they're trying to do some arbitrage or whatever. And that will actually make it cheaper for everyone else in the block.
I find this analogy so fitting here, actually. So yeah, I think this is how we should brand MEV in the future. But before we touch base here once, because we are about to wrap up this episode, if you have any questions for Sunny, please comment in the live chat. So yeah, if you have any questions, I think Sunny is happy to respond to them. But in the meantime, so we talked a lot about Mechatech and also about Skip. But at the end of the day, I think it also reminds me a little bit of this liquid staking hype development that we have seen in 2021, because slowly and steadily it was something new. Just Lido was doing it. And then all of a sudden we got so many new liquid staking protocols. And do you believe that we will basically see the same thing with MEV, that if we do this interview in 1 year from now, that we do not have Mechatech and Skip, but like 10 different other protocols that will try to leverage the same out of MEV?
Yeah, potentially. Like I said, I think hopefully a year from now, a lot of this will be moved in protocol. Where I think that, but like the cross-chain MEV is actually a thing though still, and I think the challenge is that there are like big economies of scale in the cross-chain MEV. So, Chris Goes, he actually gave a good example of imagine that like you had 10% of the voting power on chain A, and you have 10% of the voting power on the chain B. So you're the proposer, 10% on chain A, 10% on chain B. But that means only 1% of the time are you the proposer on both of the chains at the same time, right? Now, but what if you had 20% of the power on both chain A and chain B? So you're 20% the proposer on A, 20% the proposer on B. Your overlap, how often are you the proposer on both, is actually 4% of the time. So what's interesting here is you doubled your percent on each chain, but the amount of time that you got overlapped actually went up by 4 times. So there's actually a huge economy of scale. So it's better to have a bigger and bigger coalition. So I think there are like big economies of scale to having these like systems, which actually makes me kind of, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of them. I think there's going to be like 1 or 2 very dominant ones, which is a little bit scary, but I think that just, that is, I think, a little bit of the reality of the situation.
Yeah, interesting take actually. That we just will see like in your futures 1 or 2, and yeah, it will be very interesting which kind of project will capture all of this value that will come out of MEV. And here we are again, what we discussed before, and it really depends on how much the network is being used. We got some questions for you, Sunny. So one question is, when Orderbook launch?
When Orderbook launch? I don't think we have a set date yet. I saw a tweet that I said 3 months at Nebular. I don't know. I don't remember saying that, but I was also very hungover, so maybe I said that by accident. But like I said, it is our like number one sort of priority. There's a couple of like features that have been in development for a little while that we're just finishing really quickly. So like TWAP Oracle is getting the stable swap live, just because the code for those is done. We just want to like test them and put them on chain. But then yeah, starting in August, it's like, the focus is like, let's get these order books. We want to knock them out as soon as possible.
Nice. Yeah. Ravel was rough, I believe. Another question, I find this question is a very good one. It's a little bit more techy. Sunny, what are some foundational languages to learn before learning CosmWasm?
Rust. I mean, I think definitely you have to learn Rust to do CosmWasm. I also recommend also knowing Go, and like, just because, to do CosmWasm, it's kind of like, it's not a pure, you could do like pure smart contracting on CosmWasm, but I think a lot of the interesting stuff comes when you combine the Cosmos SDK and CosmWasm. So it is helpful to have like a good understanding of the Cosmos SDK. That's where you can do interesting interactions between them. But really, yeah, you should just, you got to learn Rust to do CosmWasm development. I highly actually recommend there's a CosmWasm Academy being built right now, so it'll be launched pretty soon. But if you're like too eager to get started before that, you can also go to this might, it's academy.terra.money, but they have good educational material on CosmWasm development, so check that out as well.
Yeah, and we can also provide necessary links for that in the description below. So for people who are not watching this live, last question. I think this is also a pretty interesting one. Should I be afraid of Osmosis V11 upgrade? Could you maybe elaborate a little bit what the Osmosis V11 upgrade is all about?
Yeah, so the Osmosis V11 upgrade it's a very simple upgrade. It's, you can look at the code change from the last upgrade. It's like, very few lines of code. All it is, so I don't know if people saw, there was like some recent spam attacks on Osmosis where someone was like created a lot of gauges, and they were just trying to like make the epoch take longer. It made it take a few minutes longer. It wasn't like the end of the world. But yeah, basically what we're doing is adding a fee, so that way you can't just like adding a fee to the creating of gauges. So so that way no one can do that spam attack basically. So that's one change that we did, and the other change that we did was people have, I don't know if people have seen, like, there've been a lot of these like governance spam proposals in the deposit, and so what we were making it, because you could actually put up a governance proposal with no Osmo, because the idea is, you could actually, you want to crowdfund the deposit for the governance proposal, but that kind of becomes annoying. So what we did was we actually made it so you have to put up some Osmo yourself to be the to put up the proposal in the first place. So whatever the deposit is required, so you're going to need to pay 25% as the proposer. So if the deposit on a proposal is 1,000 Osmo, 25% of that has to come from the proposer themselves. So very simple changes. No, it doesn't touch the AMM. It doesn't touch anything. And we knew that this was like a sort of a upgrade that we're doing just to handle the spam attack. And the learning that we had, one of the learnings we had from last time was like, hey, we don't have to rush to get in as many features as possible every single upgrade, right? Let's we want to do an upgrade with just this one change. Let's just focus on just that change and not add other stuff in as well. So, yeah.
In a nutshell, we don't have to be afraid. Yeah, so I think there are so many exciting things going on. I mean, we could talk about MEV for another hour, I believe. So Sunny, thank you so much for being on the show once again. Very eye-opening. I think we also cleared some confusion here and there about MEV, some misconceptions. So I think this is a very important discussion. And yeah, thank you so much. Also, all the best with the V11 upgrade. Apparently, it's nothing severe. And also, best of luck with the switch to the Orderbook model. And very excited to see you in Medellin.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you guys for watching. And yeah, hope to see you on Thursday, where we will have a live stream actually with Skip Protocol following up on this one. So stay tuned. Thank you so much, guys.